Hey, what's up everybody? I hope you're all doing well out there. Today we're talking about the new crime thriller called The Tax Collector, written and directed by David Ayer. This genre is right in Ayer's wheelhouse and it looked extremely promising to me. This review is also going to be spoiler free, then I'm going to give my grade. After that we're going to get into some spoiler talk, so let's dive into this one to see what this movie delivers. This one stars Shia LaBeouf, Bobby Soto, and Cynthia Carmona. In this one, LaBeouf and Soto play tax collectors David and Creeper. Only they don't work for the IRS. They work for a crime lord and they collect operating taxes from gangs all over Los Angeles. It's a profitable job, but it's also, of course, a dangerous one, and that's something they're going to learn firsthand when their boss's rival comes back into town to take over their turf, rendering them basically obsolete. Now personally, I'm always interested when I see a new David Ayer film come up. Most people tend to relate him to the Suicide Squad, but to me, that wasn't an Ayer film as much as it was a studio movie. To me, David Ayer is the director that delivered Harsh Times, End of Watch, Street Kings, and Fury in his first 5 movies, with the not-so-great movie in that run being a not-so-bad Arnold-led thriller called Sabotage. As a writer, David Ayer has provided us with U-571, The Fast and the Furious, Training Day, SWAT, and Dark Blue, all of which I also think are solid flicks. So naturally, when Ayer releases a new project, I tend to be excited, I tend to have higher than normal expectations. That was the case going into The Tax Collector, and that is why it pains me greatly to say that this movie was a massive letdown for a variety of reasons. But first, let's get into what I think this movie did do well. I think the first act framed up a nice tension-filled world of organized crime. Seeing LaBeouf and Soto navigate through a violent world was very gritty, and it did create some solid tension, as you could never be too sure when and where something bad would happen. And it certainly was a routine trope for the genre, but I did find some appeal in the contrasting of Soto's character David's multiple lives. He's a deadly man, he kills for a living, but he comes home at night like a normal father to his wife and kids, and sure, this dynamic has been done many times before, and yes, it was a blatant attempt to connect you to his family for use later in the story, but early on at least, I enjoyed how this set up the story progression and created that duality within his character. As for LaBeouf's character of Creeper, I think LaBeouf delivered a very intense and very emotionally charged performance. He was supposed to be a man that was dead behind the eyes and capable of the most gruesome acts of violence, and while watching LaBeouf move about as Creeper, I felt he pulled it off. He looked ready to go in an instant, and I liked how that created a tinge of curiosity as to what he would be like when handling himself in a confrontation. I also enjoyed Ayer's direction. I felt he brought a lot of visual intensity to the screen. This was a grimy storyline filled with very seedy characters, and his camera work captured that atmosphere effectively, but unfortunately those are really the only positives in this movie for me. Like I said earlier, the story does set the stage for an intriguing, violent battle of the bad guys, but instead it seems to opt for this more routine path we've seen in this genre before, with a plot we've seen too many times before in straight-to-video crime thrillers. The dialogue is very preachy. It was part exposition, part melodrama. The dialogue seemed much more intent on just trying to tell you how the characters felt rather than relying on the performances to naturally capture those emotions, which did give the dramatic layering a manufactured vibe. I mean, sure, we've all seen movies where bad guys must deal with even badder bad guys. That plot's been done before, but it is a plot that I think is really built for retelling when the right pieces are stitched into it. This storyline does deliver some misdirection, only it went the wrong direction, and that's something that we're going to get into more later when we talk spoilers. I will though say that in terms of just various story branches this one could have taken to tell itself, that it just seemed to choose the least interesting branch, and that's just my opinion at least. I also think it slaps on violence that was graphic to the point of being gratuitous. I think if these moments had been woven into the story better, they would have worked, yet with their placement here, these splashes of hyper-violence felt like blatant attempts at shock value gore, so despite the savage viciousness of it, these scenes felt like empty calories and didn't hit with the intended impact at all for me. And I think the main problem for me with The Tax Collector was that despite my love for these types of movies, the emotional intensity never felt authentic. I think it wasted the potential of some of the characters and what their overall impact on the story could have been. I think it was surprisingly dull, and that was primarily because it felt like it was trying way too hard to just persuade the dramatic intensity without letting it progress and grow naturally through the performances. So for me, this movie was a miss. As much as I wanted to love The Tax Collector, it didn't work for me. I'm only going to be able to give it 45% on the meter, and that extra 5% is being a little bit generous. The potential was there, but it didn't follow through with it, on my opinion. It also was generic in places as far as storytelling. It was a little bit uninspired as well. I do think pieces of the movie do work, other pieces don't, but unfortunately the pieces that don't usually are the glue of a solid flick. Now let's get into some spoilers to talk about some of my main issues with this film. If you haven't seen it yet, now is the time to check out. I thank you very much for watching. If you're still here, then you don't care about plot points and character arcs being exposed, so you have been warned. There is no doubt in my mind the primary issue with this movie was the wasted character of Creeper and subsequently Shia LaBeouf. I mean, this guy talks like he's the toughest guy you will come across. He's constantly verbally reminding us that he isn't scared of anyone, and that's naturally going to build some excitement for seeing him in action. But after a couple gunshots in the first real conflict, he goes down and is later killed as a form of torture for Soto's character. Now don't get me wrong, I certainly think this element of the story could have worked had it been woven in a little bit better, but you can't have this guy talking himself up like he's an old school WWF wrestler, then having him take a bullet just into the first main conflict. And it all really goes back to where I said this movie felt like it just tells you what to think about these characters rather than showing you. I mean, come on, at least let us see Creeper in action a little bit. Let us get some connection with the character so his loss will actually mean something when we see it, because the way he's removed from this film was contrived. It wasn't nearly as impactful as intended. Instead, for me, it was just really an irritation because showing every scene LaBeouf had in this film in the trailer to sell it as his film was misleading, and in the end, it was a letdown as it turned into Bobby Soto's movie. And don't get me wrong, Soto was fine in his performance at times, but it wasn't a character that was unique enough to be the lead in a movie. The story never developed his character. You never have time to connect with him. You don't need to necessarily sympathize with him to connect with his arc in the film, but you want to at least have an interest in what will happen. And with the processed feel of the script, I didn't get that here as well. Thus, when the film turns into him trying to save his family, I couldn't care less. The swings in the story also stretched the emotional range of the character, and it did lead to some moments of overacting from Soto as well. And I don't know, I guess that's pretty much it for me on this movie, guys. Thanks for sticking around if you're still here. I love this genre like a lot of people love Marvel movies, so when one doesn't deliver, I really get bummed out because it means I'm going to have to wait until the next one comes around. I think this would have been a much better film had Ayer taken on a partner on the writing side, because I think sometimes creative ideas are better once they've filtered through more than one brain, and that certainly felt like the case here because this movie should have been much better. Thank you so much for watching this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, drop it a thumbs up, leave a comment below. I'd love to talk movies with you guys. Share it with your friends, and without question, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you can never miss a video. Here are some links to some recent reviews just in case you missed them. All my social media links and the link to our official website are down in the description below, and I'll catch you next time.